I was standing in front of my bedroom mirror, fastening the pearl necklace my late husband had given me, preparing for a rare evening out. My daughter-in-law Jessica had invited me to an exclusive dinner downtown. For a brief moment, I felt a flicker of warmth. Since my husband passed away 2 years ago, my son David and his wife had barely included me in their lives unless they needed a quick favor. Just as I grabbed my purse, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Arthur an old family friend and the attorney who had handled my husband's estate. I answered, expecting a quick hello. "Stephanie, do not go to that dinner." Arthur urged, his voice unusually sharp. "Come to my office right now. You won't believe what I've uncovered." A cold knot formed in my stomach, but I kept my voice steady. "Arthur, I am dressed and walking out the door. Tell me now." He sighed heavily. "David and Jessica sent a document to my office this afternoon asking me to rush a review. It is a quitclaim deed. They are trying to transfer the ownership of your house completely into their names." In their attached email, Jessica claimed you had already agreed to sign the house over to them tonight, move into their basement, and take over full-time childcare so she can return to work. They plan to rent out your house to fund a new business venture. The silence in my hallway felt deafening. My own son was trying to strip away my independence, turn me into an unpaid nanny, and take my home all disguised as a fancy dinner invitation. "Thank you, Arthur," I replied quietly. "Do not process anything. I will handle this." "Do you want me to prepare a legal response?" he asked. "No," I answered. "I don't need the law to deal with my own family. I just need to set things straight." I didn't collapse. I didn't cry. I simply touched up my lipstick, grabbed my keys, and headed to the restaurant. I needed to look them in the eye and watch their performance. The restaurant was one of those dimly lit, overpriced establishments where the menus didn't list prices. Jessica waved at me from a corner booth wearing a designer dress I knew she couldn't afford on David's salary. David sat beside her, refusing to meet my gaze. I slid into the booth, offering a polite nod. "Stephanie." "You look lovely." Jessica beamed, her tone dripping with a forced sweetness that instantly set off my internal alarms. "We are just so happy to treat you tonight. We know how lonely you must be in that big, empty house." "I'm quite comfortable, actually," I replied, opening my menu. Throughout the appetizers, Jessica laid the groundwork. She complained about the cost of daycare. She sighed about how much David missed having me around. She painted a tragic picture of a frail widow who needed her family to rescue her. "We've been thinking—" Jessica leaned forward, lowering her voice, as if sharing a precious secret. "The kids need their grandmother. And you shouldn't have to worry about maintaining a property at your age. We have a beautifully finished basement. You could live with us rent-free and help raise the children. It's the perfect solution." David finally looked up, his eyes filled with a passive, greedy hope. "It makes sense, Mom. Financially, it's best for everyone." Then Jessica reached into her designer bag and placed a thick manila envelope on the table. We had Arthur draw up some preliminary paperwork, just to make the transition easier. I looked at the envelope, then at my son. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat. They really thought I was a foolish, desperate old woman who would sign away her sanctuary for a basement room and a full-time babysitting job. I didn't yell. I didn't cause a scene. I simply stood up, pulled a $50 bill from my purse, and placed it on the table to cover my appetizer. "I enjoy my house, Jessica. And I enjoy my quiet evenings," I stated calmly. "Have a nice dinner." I turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving the envelope untouched. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. I woke up the next morning feeling a deep, clarifying sense of purpose. For 2 years, I had allowed guilt and grief to blur my boundaries. Because I wanted to maintain a connection with my grandchildren, I had become a silent financial crutch for David and Jessica. I made a pot of coffee, opened my laptop, and logged into my bank account. There they were, the auto drafts I had set up when David briefly lost his job and never canceled. The monthly payment for David's car insurance, the hefty tuition for my grandchildren's private school, the recurring charge for a family country club membership that I had never once visited. I clicked cancel on the car insurance. I clicked cancel on the school tuition. I clicked cancel on the country club membership. No arguments, no dramatic announcements, just practical financial control. It was my money, and I was done funding the lifestyle of people who viewed me as a disposable asset. Around 10 o'clock, I heard the familiar crunch of tires in my driveway. I glanced out the window. Jessica's SUV was idling, and she was unbuckling my 2 grandchildren from the back seat. She hadn't called. She simply assumed I would be home to watch them while she went shopping. I grabbed my gym bag, opened the front door, and locked the deadbolt behind me. Jessica paused on the walkway, holding a diaper bag. "Oh, good. You're up. I need you to watch them for about 4 hours. I have appointments. I have a Pilates class." "Jessica," I replied, walking right past her toward my car. She blinked, utterly confused. "But I have to go out. You didn't tell me you had plans. You didn't ask if I was available," I pointed out, unlocking my car door. "Have a safe trip back home." "Stephanie, wait. I have nowhere else to take them," she demanded, her sweet facade cracking. I started the engine and lowered the window. "Then I suggest you take them with you." I backed out of the driveway, leaving her standing on my lawn with her mouth open. The boundaries were set. The financial shockwave was coming next. The fallout arrived exactly 3 days later. I was in my garden pruning the rose bushes when my phone vibrated in my pocket. David's name flashed on the screen. I answered, placing the phone on speaker as I clipped a dying bloom. "Mom, what is going on with your bank account?" David's voice was frantic, lacking any of the gentle tone he had tried to use at the restaurant. "Nothing is wrong with my account, David. The bank is functioning perfectly," I replied, sweeping the clippings into a pile. "The school just called me. They said the tuition payment bounced, and my auto insurance sent an alert that the card on file was declined. You need to call the bank and fix this immediately." I removed my gardening gloves and picked up the phone. There is nothing to fix. I canceled those auto transfers on Wednesday morning. I am adjusting my retirement budget. Dead silence hung on the line for several seconds. "You canceled them." "Mom, you can't do that. We rely on that money. We don't have room in our budget for the kids' tuition and my car insurance. You know, Jessica doesn't work. Then Jessica might need to find a job, or you might need to find a public school," I suggested practically. "You are a 35-year-old man, David. It is time you cover your own household expenses." "This is about the dinner, isn't it?" he accused, his voice rising in panic and anger. Because you misunderstood the house thing. We were trying to protect your assets." "Mom, you are being entirely unreasonable." I didn't bother defending myself. I didn't demand an apology for the quitclaim deed. Arguing with them gave them power, and I was finished handing over my power. My assets do not need your protection, David. Nor does my house. Do not ask me for money again. I ended the call and slipped the phone back into my pocket. The sun felt warm on my face. For the first time in years, I felt completely in control of my own life. But I knew Jessica wouldn't surrender this easily. I needed to secure my perimeter. The next morning, I hired a local locksmith. By noon, every deadbolt doorknob and sliding glass door latch in my home had been entirely replaced. I watched the technician hand me the shiny new silver keys, feeling a solid sense of ownership. David and Jessica had kept a spare key to my house since my husband's funeral, supposedly for emergencies. I knew it was only a matter of time before they tried to use it. I didn't have to wait long. At 4 o'clock that afternoon, I was in the kitchen brewing tea when I heard the distinct sound of metal scraping against the front door lock. Then came a frustrated jiggling of the handle. I walked quietly to the foyer and waited. It's jammed, Jessica's voice filtered through the heavy oak door. David, push your shoulder into it. A heavy thud rattled the frame. I calmly flipped the interior deadbolt, engaged the security chain, and opened the door just a few inches. David stumbled forward, catching himself on the door frame. Jessica stood behind him, her face flushed with anger. She glared at the gap in the door. "You changed the locks," she shrieked, dropping all pretense of being a sweet daughter-in-law. "I did." I confirmed, taking a sip of my tea. "Can I help you with something? You locked your own son out of his childhood home. Mom, you are acting crazy. Let us in. We need to talk about this financial mess you've caused us." David demanded though. He looked nervously at the heavy security chain. "This is my home, David. Not a public park and certainly not a bank branch. If you want to visit, you can call and ask for an invitation. Showing up unannounced and trying to force your way inside is unacceptable. We are family." Jessica snapped, stepping closer to the door. "You owe us an explanation. I owe you nothing." "Jessica," I stated, my voice completely flat. "My finances are my business. My house is my sanctuary. Have a good evening." I closed the door gently in their faces, locked the deadbolt, and walked back to my kitchen. Let them stand on the porch. I had bigger plans to make. That evening, I walked through the quiet rooms of my house. It was a beautiful place filled with memories of my husband, but it was also a massive footprint that tied me to a family that only saw me as a resource. It was time to sever the anchor completely. I picked up the phone and called a trusted real estate agent I had known for a decade. "Margaret, it's Stephanie Murray. I want to sell my house," I stated firmly. "Stephanie, that's a big step. Do you want me to come over next week to talk about staging? We can list it next month." "No open houses, no staging," I interrupted gently. "I want a quiet, private sale. Cash buyer preferred. A quick closing. I don't care if I leave a little money on the table. I want a clean, fast break." Margaret understood immediately. Within 3 days, she brought me a very fair all-cash offer from a retired couple moving from out of state. I signed the preliminary acceptance papers right there at my kitchen table. With the sale in motion, I started packing. I didn't take everything. I hired an estate sale company to quietly inventory the heavy furniture and items I no longer needed. I only packed the things that mattered: photo albums, my husband's favorite armchair, my jewelry, and my gardening tools. Then I went online and found exactly what I wanted: a bright modern condo in a secure 55 and older community on the coast 3 hours away. It had a balcony overlooking the watertight security at the front gate and a strict guest policy. I signed a year-long lease and wired the deposit. As I taped up a box of kitchen plates, I felt lighter than I had in years. The heavy burden of expectations was slipping away. I wasn't just changing my address. I was changing my entire reality. I was halfway through packing this living room when a shadow fell across the front window. I looked up. David was standing on the porch, his face pressed against the glass, staring at the stack of moving boxes. David pounded heavily on the glass, his eyes wide with panic, as he took in the cardboard boxes stacked high in my living room. I calmly finished taping the box of books I was working on, stood up and walked out the back door to circle around to the front porch. I didn't want him inside. "What is this, Mom?" he demanded as soon as I rounded the corner. "Are you moving? What is going on?" "I am downsizing, David," I replied, crossing my arms over my chest. "You can't just move. Where are you going? And what about the house?" He paced across the porch, running a hand through his hair. "Jessica is losing her mind. We had to put the kids in public school. My insurance rate skyrocketed because I missed a payment. We were relying on this house as our safety net. You can't just pack up and leave us struggling. I watched my son searching for any trace of the boy I had raised. All I saw was a man throwing a tantrum because his free ride was over. You are 35, David. You have a job. Your wife is perfectly capable of working. My home is not your safety net, and my bank account is not your emergency fund. We are your family, he yelled, finally showing genuine frustration. You are abandoning your grandchildren over a misunderstanding. There was no misunderstanding. I countered, keeping my voice dangerously calm. You and Jessica tried to trick me into signing away the deed to my own home so you could profit off it while sticking me in your basement to be an unpaid nanny. That isn't family. That is exploitation. He flinched, looking away. He knew I was right. I am taking control of my future, I stated. You should focus on taking control of yours. I turned and walked back toward the side gate. Jessica won't let this go, Mom, he called out after me. She says you owe us. I paused, looking over my shoulder. Jessica is about to learn a very hard lesson about entitlement. Moving day arrived with clear blue skies. The professional movers I hired were quick and efficient, loading my carefully labeled boxes and few pieces of furniture into their truck. I stood on the porch with a clipboard checking off items, feeling a profound sense of relief. Just as the movers were securing the ramp, Jessica's SUV sped down the street, taking the corner too fast and screeching to a halt, blocking my driveway. She leaped out of the car, slamming the door. She was clutching a familiar manila envelope, the quitclaim deed from the restaurant. David trailed behind her, looking miserable and entirely passive. Stop loading the truck. Jessica ordered the movers, waving her free hand. The two large men looked at her, then looked at me. Keep working, gentlemen, I instructed them with a nod. Jessica marched right up to the porch, her face red with fury. You are completely out of your mind, Stephanie. You are throwing a tantrum like a child. We have financial plans tied to this property. You are going to ruin our family over your stubborn pride. I handed my clipboard to the lead mover and stepped down to meet her on the walkway. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. You do not give orders on my property, Jessica. Step out of the way of the truck. No, she shouted, stepping deliberately in front of the ramp. You owe David an inheritance. This house is his right. You are going to sign this paper, and we are going to fix this mess you made. If you drive away today, you will never see your grandchildren again. She brandished the envelope like a weapon, using the children as her final emotional threat. 2 years ago, that threat would have broken me. Today, it only confirmed that I was making the exact right choice. I looked at her completely unfazed. I slowly reached into my leather handbag and pulled out a single folded piece of paper. The only document that mattered now. I think you need to read this, I said, holding it out to her. Jessica snatched the paper from my hand, her eyes scanning the text quickly. I watched her expression shift from aggressive confidence to utter confusion and finally to pure shock. David stepped up beside her, reading over her shoulder. A settlement statement. Jessica whispered, the color draining from her face. Cash transaction. Closing date, yesterday. She looked up at me, her hands trembling. You sold it. You actually sold the house. I did, I confirmed smoothly. The new owners take possession at noon today. That is why the movers are here. But the money, David stammered, staring at the massive sale figure printed at the bottom of the page. Mom, what did you do with the money from the sale? The funds were wired directly into a secure private trust account, I explained, looking directly at my son. An account that solely funds my retirement and my new life. None of it is accessible to anyone but me. Jessica crumpled the settlement paper in her fist. You stole our future. We were banking on this property. We can't afford the lifestyle we have without your help. Then you will have to change your lifestyle, I replied, feeling no pity for the woman who tried to steal my independence. You tried to take my home and turn me into your servant. Because of that, you get nothing. Not the house, not my money, and not my time. I turned to the movers. Are we ready, gentlemen? All packed up, ma'am. The driver nodded, closing the back of the truck. David looked at the empty house, the reality finally crushing him. His passive greed had cost him everything. Mom, what have you done? I protected myself, David. I suggest you learn to do the same. I walked to my car, unlocked it, and slid into the driver's seat. I started the engine, backed carefully around Jessica's poorly parked SUV, and drove down the street. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. There was nothing left to see. The ocean breeze felt incredibly refreshing against my skin. I stood on the balcony of my new coastal condo, a cup of hot coffee in my hand, watching the morning tide roll in. The community was quiet, safe, and entirely mine. The heavy antique furniture was gone, replaced by light, comfortable pieces that fit my new life perfectly. My phone vibrated on the patio table. The screen displayed David's name. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. I wasn't ignoring him out of spite, but because I no longer jumped at his command. I took another sip of my coffee before playing the message. Mom! His voice sounded exhausted and humbled. It's David. Look, things have been really hard. Jessica and I are having to downsize, and she had to take a part-time job. We were wrong. I was wrong to let her push that deed on you. I miss you. Please call me back. I deleted the voicemail. I would call him back, but on my terms. I decided I would call him on Sundays afternoon for exactly 15 minutes. I would send thoughtful gifts for the grandchildren's birthdays mailed directly to their house. I would maintain a polite, distant relationship with my son. But the Bank of Stephanie was permanently closed. The free babysitting service was terminated. The spare keys would never be handed out again. I didn't need a courtroom to find justice. I didn't need a lawyer to punish them. The ultimate consequence for David and Jessica was simply having to face the real world without my wallet to protect them. I set my coffee mug down on the table, picked up my pruning shears, and walked over to tend to the potted hibiscus on my balcony. I was 68 years old, a widow and a mother. But most importantly, for the first time in a very long time, I was completely free.